All right, welcome. We'd like to welcome you all tonight for our guest lecture. I'm Stephanie Danker, Associate Professor of Art Education.
And I'm Luke Beacon, Assistant Professor of Art Education.
And we're really excited that you're all here. We have quite a few people joining on Zoom tonight from all over the country, which is really exciting. We're going to start with a land acknowledgement.
And I'm going to be reading it from this, not because this is a rote gesture, but because these words were co-authored by Miami scholars at the Miami Center, and it's very important that I get their words right. So, Miami University is located within the traditional homelands of the Miami and Shawnee people, who along with other indigenous groups ceded these lands to the United States in the first Treaty of Greenville in 1795. The Miami people, whose name our university carries, were forcibly removed from these homelands in 1846. In 1972, a relationship between Miami University and the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma began and evolved into a reciprocal partnership, including the creation of the Miami Center at Miami University in 2001. The work of the Miami Center serves the Miami Tribe community and is dedicated to the revitalization of Miami language and culture and to restoring that knowledge to the Miami people. Miami University and the Miami Tribe are proud of this work and of the more than 140 Miami students who have attended Miami since 1991 through the Miami Heritage Award Program.
This lecture is part of the John A. and Betty J. Michael Autobiographical Lecture Series in Art Education. So I'd like to just tell you a little bit about the series before we start and introduce our guests for this year. So the John A. and Betty J. Michael Autobiographical Lecture Series in Art Education was initiated by Dr. John Michael with a generous gift from he and his wife Betty in 1972 when Edwin Ziegfeld lectured at Miami University. Outstanding educators who have retired or are somewhere near retirement, definitely our guest tonight is not there, are invited to present autobiographical lectures in the series, noting the influences which have shaped their philosophy about art education and the arts. In 1991, John Michael was the featured lecturer himself, added to the ongoing lineup of influential and honored speakers. As part of an effort to make this important series more widely accessible, we also have an archive, a digital archive of this series. Although the digital opportunity wasn't imaginable at the series' inception, we believe that it honors the mission of the series in sharing and honoring the important contributions of so many prominent art educators. So the archive is growing every year, and we're really working on it to make it more accessible to other people. So we hope that you enjoy this lecture and find inspiration in the work of so many important art educators through our archives. So on your program, you can see on the back our list of all of the lectures in the series, which is pretty prominent. Okay, and then we would like to recognize our guests. If anyone from John Michael's family is joining us on Zoom, of course, we welcome them and thank them for this opportunity. Of course, we want to recognize our art education students that are here. Thank you for hosting. We've got our NAEA student chapter leaders that are here. Thank you. We've got our chair, Dr. Amanda Alexander from the Department of Art with us. And lots of other faculty members that are supportive. Jack Green from the Art Museum, Terry Haynes from Art Education. So thank you very much for being here and for supporting the program. All right. Okay, so are you ready for the bio? This is an impressive bio. So B. Stephen Carpenter II is Michael J. and Amy Versinko Keikos, Dean of the College of Arts and Architecture and Professor of Art Education and African American Studies at the Pennsylvania State University. He is also co-director of the Summer Institute on Contemporary Art and Chief Executive Artist for Reservoir Studio. During the 2017-2018 academic year, he was Ida Ellie Rubin Artist in Residence, MIT Center for Art, Science, and Technology, and Department of Urban Studies and Planning, and artisan learner in residence at the Easterly Parkway Elementary School. Steve's research in art education spans curriculum theory, professional development for pre-K through 12 teachers through contemporary art, public pedagogy, participatory art practices, and socially engaged art practice, critical art education studies, and the global water crisis as curriculum and social action. His mixed media and performance artworks confront and disrupt social, historical, cultural, and political constructs. He is co-editor of Professional Development in Art Museum, Strategies of Engagement Through Contemporary Art, 2018, the Paul Grave Handbook of Race in the Arts and Education, 2018, Curriculum for a Progressive, Provocative, Poetic, and Public Pedagogy, 2006, and co-author of Interdisciplinary Approaches to Teaching Art in High School, 2006. Steve was Senior Editor of Studies in Art Education, 2017 to 2019, and served previously as co-editor of the Journal of Curriculum and Pedagogy from 2010 to 2013, and editor of Art Education from 2004 to 2006. He is a member of the International Editorial Board of Curriculum Inquiry and a National Art Education Association, NAEA, Distinguished Fellow. So I think you can understand why we thought he was very, very worthy of this honor, and we personally have both been mentored by Steve Carpenter. So please join us in welcoming Steve.
I'm gonna go grab my little iPad. I'll be right back. Well, that was some introduction. Stephanie, I apologize for having put you through and read that lengthy description. I'm just sort of speechless. I know I can't be because I have to give this talk. In some ways, I'm speechless. This is really an honor. To see that list of art educators is impressive. And to know that they have been here at Miami and have lectured on their work and their life is truly remarkable. But to know that this university has the archives and is preserving that knowledge and that legacy is phenomenal. This is an important project. And I am so pleased that you're doing this work. Drs. Meakin and Danker, you two, you're going to be on that list. The work you're doing now, the work I've seen you do, and the work that you will do in the future will change people's lives. I'm convinced of that. So thank you. All right, I'm usually the guy in the hat. I'm going to take it off. Put it there. I am thrilled that I just get to share a little bit about what I've been up to. And I have these notes just so I keep track of where I am and what I'm up to. And for those of you zooming in, wherever the Zoom camera is, thanks for joining us. Right there. All right, so here we go. This is a bit of a daunting task. An autobiographical lecture. I have to write about, talk about myself. Well, let's see how that goes. So where do I start? You've ever heard that radio program, This American Life? Relatively short period of time, you can go through one act or multiple acts. So instead of going decade by decade or year by year, I am going chunk by chunk through 6 decades of life and most of 4 decades of professional practice and scholarship. So let's do it as acts in the guise of This American Life. I wear many hats. No, literally, I wear hats. I'm wearing one of those tonight. And throughout my career, I have worn many hats, and many days I feel like I'm wearing many of them at the same time. So where to begin? I thought about, every time I think about an autobiographical lecture or presentation, I'm reminded of an article in Studies in 1994, back in the 1900s, by Brent Wilson, one of my mentors at Penn State. where he essentially reflected on his own career and his own accomplishments. Brent and his wife, Marjorie Wilson, who was my doctoral dissertation advisor, she is my second mother. And Marge, if you're out there, they really played an important role in my life. So in this article, Brent says, look, at the end, he wraps it up. He says, do we make a difference in people's lives? He asks this question. He says, he's reflecting on his life and his work, and he's wondering, what is the question? If there's a research project I could do, what would it be? If we knew what we were doing as artists and art educators, how would we know it made a difference? He says, this would be the big question. Through their contact with us and through their works of art, we have them, other people, students and anyone who creates work, create and interpret. But do we change individuals' purposes? Do we change their lives? That's the one big study. That stuck with me. It stuck with me. So Brent, as an artist, an art educator, he couldn't just write about it. I mean, the article is a written article, but he also drew it. So this is his sketchbook. Have you ever met Brent Wilson? If you've ever seen him in a presentation, not presenting, but sitting down, he takes notes in his journals. It's a little grainy there and pixelated, mostly because, he tried to do screen grabs of things. But essentially what he does is he has themes down this left column, and across the top are time periods, decades, if you will. And the circles are articles or themes or works and projects that he's working on, and he's kind of divided them into different themes. It's really this interesting visual approach. Well, this is pen on paper in a sketchbook, very analog. About the time that I read this article, I was starting to work with some digital technology, so I want to show you how I would look at my own work in my own life, inspired by Brent Wilson. This is 1995. All the way down here is 2003. Actually, no, that's 2004. That one's in progress. The ones in yellow are articles, peer-reviewed journal articles. The ones in green are book chapters. The fact that you might not be able to read this minuscule font from where you are doesn't matter so much. What you're seeing is this is a year, and then this is a year, and this column is a year, and this column is a year. So year by year, that's been the productivity just in book chapters and articles. That was kind of remarkable for me to see it that way. Those 4 white rectangles, those are the books. This is 2006, and that's 2018. And then these lines that kind of swirl around, those are the connections. Those are thematic or conceptual connections between and among works. And some of those lines are also authors or co-authors that I've authored with and co-authored with. It's all in relationship to each other. Time is a construct. We build it as much as it encourages us. There's another way you can visually represent information. It's like this. You go to Google Scholar and say, okay, how many citations per year? This is interesting. Looks like a skyline of a really interesting city. That's okay. Act 1. So we can do we heard the bio. Oh yeah, BFA, you see my master's degree, public school teacher. And then I went back to Penn State to do my PhD. I was really interested in this idea of not just making art, but being able to teach art. So at Slippery Rock, I could earn my undergraduate degree in studio art, focus on ceramics. Went to Penn State and earned my licensure along with teaching certification. And in these 2 years, I taught elementary school art and high school art and special ed art. And I also coached the JV soccer team, the boys and the girls soccer teams at my old high school. Oh, and I taught evening high school as well. So a whole range of experiences in a little bit of time. And then I went back to Penn State and earned my PhD. It says 1996. That's when I received the diploma and earned the degree officially, but I left campus in '95 because it was time to get a job. but I hadn't had my dissertation finished yet. So periodically you'll see chronology this way. Yeah, I guess autobiographical lectures have to have photos. One of those 6 people is this guy here, kind of head tilted. 2 parents, 3 brothers. My mother, she'll come up shortly in this talk. She and I, she's my first teacher. I say it all the time, she was my first teacher. And my dad and I have the same name, except for the little Roman numeral 2 after my name. Those other guys are my brothers. Seth, Drew, and Sean. So Penn State has been part of my life for longer than I realized. As someone in high school, apparently I was really thinking about going to Penn State. Having a t-shirt was important. In a basement party dancing. That's actually my mom. I'm not sure what face I'm making in this dance. And then decades later, I'm actually at Penn State wearing another Penn State shirt. So Penn State runs through my life in ways that I hadn't imagined. And thank you for this opportunity to think through that relationship. Penn State also allowed me to meet has allowed me and continues to allow me to meet some very important and influential people. Gentleman on the right is Dr. John Biggers. He studied at Hampton University. At that point, when he studied at Hampton, it was Hampton Institute for Native Americans and for Black students. His teacher left Hampton and went up to Penn State. And John went up to Penn State too. And John Biggers finished his art education degree, and then he earned his master and PhD degrees at Penn State. And I put out this argument all the time. I think John Biggers did the first arts-based dissertation in 1954. 1954. He essentially was working on some drawings for this mural he wanted to do in Houston. And Victor Lowenfeld, his professor, would travel around the country visiting students, stopped down to see what John was doing. He said, "John, what are you doing?" John said, "I'm working on this mural." I said, "You have enough there to do your PhD." So John went back to Penn State, did some coursework, and finishes his PhD. And the dissertation is essentially the history and the story of creating this mural. And it's the history of the Negro woman in the United States. A mural can be the grounding for your doctoral dissertation. So this is, I met Dr. Biggers many years later after he was at Penn State visiting, and as a grad student I got to drive him around, escort him around. It was wonderful. But I met him in Virginia at one of his exhibitions, and we had a really nice chat. So thank you, Dr. Biggers. Act 2, learning to interpret. Well, at this point, I'm at Old Dominion University, so there's the 95, so I'm without a dissertation. I'm an ABD, teaching multiple courses in the fall, overseeing the art ed program and the ceramics area. And then at night, I'm finishing chapter 6 and chapter 5 of my dissertation, and that went okay, because apparently I defended in the spring. And then at some point later, moved to VCU, and so Drs. Meekin and Denker and I had this VCU connection. And it was at that point, starting at Old Dominion and then moving to VCU, when I was editor of Art Education, the Journal of the National Art Education Association. So, Learning to Interpret is actually part of the title of one of my first publications. And it's that one, the one at the top with the top red arrow. And there's another one that happens at this moment in 1999. There's 2 names that look very similar: Carpenter DS, Carpenter DS. The DS is my mom, the BS is me. My mom was a special education teacher. We co-authored this chapter together and presented at the NAEA conference in San Francisco. I'll always remember how proud I was of my mom and she was. It was this mutual, was love. But the point is that learning to interpret that article is a space where I laid out these notions of what I didn't know then, the threads that carried me throughout my career. Learning to Interpret was a 3-page article. I was so proud of this thing. I remember going to the post office and picking up some mail, but also dropping off the manuscript, because in those days you actually physically had to put things in the mail and people had to touch it. It wasn't like clicking. But this article really set the groundwork for a lot of the work that I had done afterwards. So we learn to interpret. Just sit back here. Learning to interpret. Right? The idea of interpretation is the making of meaning, or the revealing of meaning, or the constructing of meaning, or the challenging of meaning. With an S, meanings. There are meanings to objects, meanings to experiences, meanings to relationships. And part of what we do as art educators, I believe, is encouraging people to interpret. We learn to interpret in multiple ways. Act 3, Racing Thoughts. So at VCU for a few years, full 2002, 3, and 4, editor of art education as well. And then after VCU, my wife and I moved to Texas A&M. So at that stage, this is 2002 to 2005, remember the yellow are journal articles, the green are book chapters. In this phase, my thoughts are starting to race a little bit, in the sense that there's more opportunity. I'm in a new university and I'm teaching these courses, and I have different kinds of students. Now I have graduate students in art education, and I'm starting to publish more. I'm starting to work with different people, and things are starting to swirl. But I also started to work in ways that I hadn't before, with more intentionality, working with co-authors. And although I still was working on solo art authored works, this one, Never a Dull Moment, Pat's Barbershop, I also worked with Pamela G. Taylor. I think she might be up this high. Racing Thoughts is the name of one of the articles that we worked on early on. And it comes from the title of a work by Jasper Johns, one of my favorite artists. It was a 3-line statement that we have in the article. It is essentially Jasper Johns' artist statement. Take an object, do something to it, do something else to it. Take an object, do something to it, do something else to it. That's interpreting. That's creating new knowledge. That's a very simple methodology, but it will serve you pretty well if you're in the kitchen cooking. If you're in a conversation. Right? An object doesn't have to be a thing. It can be a word, an idea, an issue. Take an object, do something to it, do something else to it. And at that point, again, you realize this digital technology is behind the scenes, but also allowing you to point out this chronology. It's at this point that Pam and I started working on hypertext through the software story space that our professor, Marge Wilson, opened up for us and introduced us to and encouraged us to make meanings, to interpret through digital technology. So this work, Racing Thoughts, is take an object, do something to it, do something else to it. The idea was that if you were able to map out the connections between objects, ideas, references and inferences, inspirations, contexts, citations, instead of seeing something linearly, can you see it spatially? And could you move it around? could you reposition it? Remember, this is 2003. That's 21 years ago. This is before Google Glass. It's before a lot of this stuff that we're further. There's no iPhone that you can move stuff on. So this is what we were thinking. There are layers to meaning. That you can embed ideas within other ideas. And those ideas can then be connected to other ideas that have ideas embedded within them. So this is figure 3, and so this is, the page is actually here. We put a horizontal on a vertical, and so I've horizontalized it for you here. At first look at a hypertext is probably daunting, if not a little dizzying. Some may even say that hypertext is so complex that it reminds them of a scattered and clustered room. Pam and I think that's a good thing. Making meanings is messy. Learning is messy. Trying to sort out conflicting ideas is messy. But if you can move it around and reposition it and reorganize and recategorize, not in a way that's predetermined, but in a way that you can determine, we can all be reading the same text, but read it differently. We can organize differently. So we're living in Norfolk, Virginia, before we moved to VCU, and most people have routines for caring for themselves, hygiene, and routines for going to the coffee shop, and barbershops are part of those routines. And so I went to this barbershop. It's called Pat's Barbershop, and I realized at some point that there's a lot of learning that happens in a barbershop. And I go every couple of weeks to this barbershop, and I talk to the barbers in there. And after a while, maybe after a couple of years, I worked with the university's system to fill out an IRB so I could do a study in Pat's Barbershop. And we talked about it, Pat and Mink and the other barbers. We talked about it, and they loved it. They loved it. We did this, and I told them what was going on, and published this article on Pat's Barbershop. The argument is that the barbershop, it could be a beauty shop, it could be a coffee shop, it could be any shop that you frequent where there are people interacting and exchanging ideas. That's hypertext. It's a hypertextual space. It's an educational space. It's a learning space. You get to learn about yourself as much as you enjoy that coffee or get a haircut. A few years before, there was a movie called Barbershop, and one of the main characters says, if you can't talk straight in the barbershop, where can you talk straight? The idea is if we can't just say it in the barbershop, where else can you just make meanings, interpret, have really important conversations? So I make the argument that Pat's Barbershop is a hypertext. And there's Pat, and there's Mink, and there's the other guys, Rod and Jay. Write this article and interpret. It's this ethnographic, visual study. Have to have hypertext in there. So of course there's Andy Griffith and Floyd's Barbershop is there. And there's Pat. And Norman Rockwell gets represented in there. Pepon Osorio's Barbershop. I mean, you start to say, how many barbershops do you know? Let's just start there. Not how many of you frequented, but how many of you do you know? And if you put two of them in conversation with each other, what relationships do you build? What meanings emerge? So after this article was published, I brought in a stack of these, passed them out, and they were so haircut clippers stopped buzzing, opening it up and reading. They actually read a draft of it before I sent it away for final printing. And a copy of it stayed in the barbershop for years. Pat's Barbershop. We moved to Richmond, Virginia, and my wife and I lived in a building on Broad Street that was a 4.5-minute commute for me to walk from my building to my office on campus. One of the So we lived on the second floor, and the ground floor was this barbershop, Mr. Adams' barbershop. We moved from Norfolk, Pat's barbershop, Richmond, Mr. Adams' barbershop. And our mail was delivered to Mr. Adams' barbershop, because it was the same building, he was renting from us. And I had to go in there every day, and he would ask me, so what are you working on now? And I said, I'm doing research. He said, well, how are you doing your research? Well, I'm reading several books. You hear that, everybody? He thinks he's doing research, he's reading. It must be really hard doing research just to read. I said, it's more than that. We had a great conversation. Mr. Adams taught me several things, many, many lessons. One of the lessons is a lesson that he learned from his father. He said, there are two things that you should never go cheap on when you're purchasing. Your shoes and your mattress. Because if you're not in one, you're in the other. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Wrote about Adams' barbershop, too. Act 4. Curriculum theorizing public pedagogy. This act is a bit longer than the other acts. It's actually among the most transformative acts in this multi-act life. So we moved to Texas A&M, to College Station, Texas. And for some reason, I thought it was a good idea to be co-editor of as many things as possible. I'm not sure why I didn't know that happened. Texas A&M is a university that didn't have an art department, didn't have art education. It had a College of Architecture, and there was some Department of Visualization, and they had figure drawing classes with architects. And there's performance, Department of Performance Studies. So I found myself in the College of Education and Human Development. Because I have education, art education fit in there pretty well. And in that college, I was in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Culture. Essentially a curriculum and instruction department. Teaching, T, learning, L, culture, C, TLC. Right? So all the educators are in this TLC department. And math ed and science ed and reading education, and then the rest of us were the potpourri. We were culture and curriculum. It was a really wonderful group to be part of. So this is what happened during Act 4. Yellow are the articles, green are the book chapters, white are the books. Time in Texas A&M, I used to say, was kind of like this late postdoc for me. I'm not grounded in an art department. I'm not grounded in a college of architecture or the arts, but rather I'm in a college of education, and my content knowledge and experience in art informs the way that I'm teaching curriculum theory at the graduate level, and at the doctoral level and graduate level. It informs how I'm teaching the course arts for elementary educators. It informed the way that I was teaching anything, to the point where I was like, okay, if I can do whatever I need to do, I'm going to do whatever. It was transformative. It actually opened things up, putting me in a place that was less familiar. It was actually quite helpful. So 2 books emerged during this time. One with Jennifer Milam, Stephanie Springay, and Chris Sloan. We co-edited the proceedings from a book, a set of publications that were produced at the Curriculum and Pedagogy Conference. And this is a conference that has its core of curriculum and pedagogy. It's discipline non-specific in the sense that it's not a science conference, it's not an art conference, it's a curriculum and pedagogy conference. You have people from various disciplines in that space. And it's also the time that my graduate school sisters and I co-authored this book, Interdisciplinary Approaches to Teaching Art in High School. Pam Taylor, Christine Ballinger-Morris, and Billy Sessions. We were all at Penn State at the same time, earning our doctoral degrees, and we hit it off. And we hadn't written something together, the four of us, and some time passed, and we said, hey, let's work this out. And so Pam was really the leader there, but we each had our individual ways of going about the book. I'm really proud of the book. This is the book. It was interesting. It's a horizontally read book. It's not like the orientation of the spine. And well, why not? Open it up wide. You have to open it up in narrow ways. And we found that this book was adopted by many art education departments. We're pretty proud of this book. Brent Wolfson actually attended our NAEA presentation while we were telling the world about this new book. And in his sketchbook, he drew us. This is Christine. This says, it's about my story as well as our story. And this is Billy. Change is through the heart. This is Pam. This is my avatar. Pam was still in Second Life and doing all this digital technology stuff. And this is Steve. Visual culture is a complex set of sites. One of his sketchbooks. That's how we took those. We drew each one of us. I find this to be quite precious. So thanks, Paul. Yeah, this act is a longer act than the other acts. I continue to get into trouble. Continue to make multiple connections. I continue to explore possibilities. I'm writing with graduate students who are studying curriculum theory or our science education, but they are intrigued by the visual representation of information. And it's at this point where writing with graduate students really became important to me as a way for me to learn how to be a better writer. Because there's a way that as you're nurturing or encouraging people to gain experiences and skills, you have to really examine how you learn about it as well. So these four, I identify these four here in this act, but we'll only talk more specifically about three of them. But each of these four, and thank you for this opportunity to talk tonight and during the lecture series, because I didn't realize how much autobiography actually played into my work over the years. It's really played an important role in many of the things that I've worked on. So this this publication, I used the phrase "I'm a troublemaker" earlier. This one I co-authored with my friend and brother Kevin Taven. We were we were invited to write a chapter for a book on curriculum theory. So we did. And I said, what if we, well, no, nobody would. Like, yeah, let's use the format of a graphic novel. Because we've been writing about visual culture and curriculum theorizing and challenging the ways in which people make meaning. Let's do that. And well, it wasn't as easy as it sounds, but it was pretty well received. There's the urban skyline. We're drawing together. We like to play on words. Right? We're working together, drawing together, but we're also drawing ideas together. And so the one on the left and the one on the right look identical, but they're not. Because when you submit a manuscript for review, you need to mask the authors so that the reviewers don't know who wrote the article. But in this one, we actually have a dialogue. Kevin and Steve are talking to each other, so then we had to have masked author 1 and masked author 2, so they didn't know who wrote this thing. And then that caused problems because the journal didn't. So anyway, this is how we solved that. So one of us was masked author 1 at Masked University A, and the other was masked author 2 at Masked University B. All correspondence regarding this graphic depiction of scholarship should be directed to the authors, masked authors at email.edu or, those weren't real email addresses. They got published. Even our endnotes were in graphic novel format. The masked authors extend our appreciation to one of our graduate students for the use of their images of Jacques Lacan. So the image was created as part of one of our courses in the summer of 2009. If we gave you more details, we would reveal our secret identity. Sorry. It was still fun. Man. This is. Do we mask our faces? Oh yeah, we had to mask our faces. Look. What, masked author 1, question mark. Well, masked author 2. We had to go through that process. But this was an autobiographical. I mean, Kevin and I talked this thing through as we were writing it, and we authored it and published it in this way. Stephanie Springay invited me to submit actually Stephanie and Deb Friedman, we're working on this book about mothering, but think of M/othering, looking at the ways that women who are mothers, but not necessarily just women who are mothers, but mothers as scholars and researchers navigate that space, and the ways in which a parental approach to life informs one's work. Even though the book's called Mothering, most of the authors were women, and many of them were mothers, but there were a few men who were authors who were not mothers. So I said, oh, I'll write about this. It was about this time that my wife was pregnant. And so I was really reflecting on, okay, this is great. And then I thought twice. Then I did a double take. I said, that means that I'm going to be somebody's dad. That might not be the best. Well, because I've lived with myself all my life. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be somebody's dad. What do? I've never done this before. I don't know what. So I started sending emails to my future child, explaining the things I was thinking. And those emails became the section dividers for the chapter. So Steve Carpenter, I sent it to, from one of my email addresses to the other email address, subject, face-to-face interface. For now, I must send these emails to myself. I must stand in for you, take your place until you can take up and stand up and speak up for yourself. In talking to myself, I'm talking to you. And by talking to you this way, I'm helping myself to better know you and me. Thank you for talking with me. I guess I'm trying to work out, for the time being, a better sense of what we mean to each other. Our shared autobiographical imagining has been helpful for me so far, and I hope that one day you and I will understand what these talks meant to me. I hope that we will always be able to communicate with each other, whether mediated through digital devices or not. I'm a bit old school, in some respects more 1.0 than 2.0, you might say, and prefer face-to-face interface, but for now these email exchanges will have to do. Love. And then I can talk about it. And so the whole chapter is about me using the technology to say, okay, here's something else I'm thinking about, here's something else I'm concerned about. And then there's all this theorizing, and then at the end, once the chapter was accepted, our daughter was born, and so I had to write this epilogue, reflect on the experience. How are we doing for time? We have about 13 minutes, is that right? Okay, we're going to speed up some acts here. So you can see how this plays out. That's the sequence. At any rate, that chapter was autobiographical. I had to reflect and use devices of autobiographical research. This is an article that Christine Ballinger Morris and I wrote, co-authored on being invisible and passing through walls. Christine's writing from her identity as a Native American individual, and I'm writing from my identity as a Witblickian. Oh, you don't know that term? White, black, Indian. From all those things together. But on our wedding certificate, marriage license, the line wasn't long enough to put white, black, Native American / Indian. As a matter of fact, I could only check one box. And the person who was typing it on the form had to condense all of those because I was not going to have that certificate only have one of those things represented. So in City Hall in Norfolk, Virginia, I'm listed as Whitlicken. And I write about that ordeal, going to the mosque and we're going to get married, but before we can get married, I needed a marriage license. The only way to do that is autobiographical. So if you can imagine 500,000 people that do not have utilities, do not have paved roads, do not have housing that's up to code, this was what we were dealing with in the south of Texas. When we were in Texas A&M, I worked with Oscar Munoz, and apparently there's a way you can take clay, dry sawdust, add some water, make clay body, and press a form that when it's fired creates pores that allows water that's contaminated with waterborne disease to pass through, and it eliminates the microbes and renders the water potable. So this is some of the work that goes up to it. It's pretty refreshing. Fits in a 5-gallon water bucket. I didn't invent this, but people who invented it taught other people who taught me how to do it, and I was encouraging other people to learn how to do this technology. And Oscar and I worked very hard with a lot of other people to set up a facility down outside of Blue River, Texas, to produce water. We took the studio outside in front of the art galleries and made filters one day. When I moved to Penn State, and I was in the process of moving to Penn State, before I moved to Penn State from Texas A&M, the Smithsonian Institution was having a call for the 150th anniversary of land grant institutions, and Texas A&M was one of the ones selected. Do you know what they proposed to represent their university? The water filters. So for 4 weeks on the mall, we set up a water filter facility and made water filters on the mall. And someone from the Smithsonian said, "Can we have one of these and take it to the Red Castle?" And said, "Sure." So one of those filters is in the Smithsonian. So taking those filters out into the public, making the work visible, making it public was necessary. So I took that concept with me to Penn State, and we spent an entire day in front of the former Palmer Museum of Art. We had a new museum that will open June 1st. But that plaza is just waiting for somebody to do something, isn't it? So what if you just made water filters all day? And you didn't lecture. But as you were working and people were asking you questions, you could let them know that in Texas there are 500,000 people who do not have clean roads, who do not have paved roads, clean water, and sanitation. You can let them know about the thousands of children who die every single day somewhere in the world because of lack of sanitation, lack of clean water. And you can let them know that clay can make a difference. That there are ways that we can engage in people's lives that are creative and that matter. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how old you are to make connections, to make meanings. Do you have a drink of the water from today? You did. You know where it comes from. Every little kid your age has that opportunity. Well, have you ever been thirsty? I mean, there are ways to engage. Or it's also fun just to squish clay. Act 5. Well, finally took a sabbatical. You can see the word sabbatical. Kept bumping around to different universities. I hadn't put in my time. And there's more editing that happened. The yellow are journal articles, the green are book chapters. Still co-authoring with people. I want to highlight these 2 articles. This first one, these folks, this piece actually started when I was at Texas A&M. met all these individuals at Texas A&M. Patrick Slattery, especially postmodernism, and it was important and hot, and then curriculum theory. Patrick works on this book called Curriculum Development in the Postmodern Era. And that book had just come out as I was leaving Penn State to go to Old Dominion. And they said, yeah, we want to hire you, but you need to rewrite the curriculum for art education. I said, great. And then I said, I'll take the job. And I said, I don't know what I'm doing. So I found this book. Years later, Patrick and I are colleagues. And so Patrick and I, and Jennifer, and Mei Wu, and Michael, Mitzi, and Jim, we worked on this piece. The idea was that teaching our curriculum theory courses, we used self-disclosure as the methodology, autobiographical content as the methodology, sharing life stories about our families and about ourselves to help students engage with the theory and the content of curriculum development. Social practice and socially engaged art. Pablo Helguera has been informative and influential to me in my thinking. His handbook on socially engaged art, the approach to art where there aren't specific materials. So it's kind of a comedic approach there. But it's this unstable, uncertain, moving target of what an art practice can be. His theory has these two notions, and I pulled them from different parts of his book. In order to provoke reflection, in order to discover something in the process. Why do we make art? Why do we ask questions? Why do we create something that isn't there? Why do we juxtapose things? Why do we challenge? Why do we change this color? It's to provoke reflection in order to discover something in the process. That's what research is. That's how we gain knowledge. We challenge ourselves by being provocative. What if you work with, well, that's not the right one. That's supposed to be theirs. Okay, anyway. Cut and paste will get you something. So I worked with Ross Schlemmer and Erica Hitchcock. Ross, art educator, Erica, a high school teacher. What if we thought through this water filter process, this socially engaged practice, and what it means for high school students? So I find myself writing with different kinds of people who are also parents. What if you brought a whole group of high school kids to Penn State for 3 days from Virginia Beach and said, okay, we're going to learn about water filters. And it fits within their IB portfolio. We had a really good time. Big Ten Network got a hold of what we were up to in the Reservoir Student and made one of their feature videos that shows up on Big Ten sporting events and on Megatron TVs. So that big press, it's kind of weird, it's large, it's heavy. It'd be much easier if I could put it in a suitcase and take it. Oh, hey, engineering students. Your capstone course says if you have a problem to solve and you have a semester to solve it, you can solve it because that's your capstone course. I need a press that's usually 6 feet tall and weighs 400 pounds. Can you make one that fits into a suitcase? And don't spend a lot of money because it's supposed to be affordable. And they did. Wow. It holds up, fits into a suitcase, and I can take the show on the road. To provoke reflection in order to discover something. All right, we're going to zip through. We probably have very little time left. This is Montpelier, Vermont, the capital of Vermont. What if you wanted to interrogate that public space? You could do it pretty well. Just go on the guided tour and look around and take some notes, look at the brochure. Or you could take a little tiny president sculpture like that big, little toy sculpture of George Washington, and there's George Washington. How do you read spaces with other objects? Putting things in conversation to provoke reflection in order to discover something in the process. Please keep off. Okay, but I'm not there, but John Adams is. Teddy Roosevelt. Sometimes we look, sometimes we can see, sometimes we can make meaning when we're distracted or when we are guided, when we have disconnections that help us make connections. Dave Lincoln, Elliot Erwitt's photograph, 1955 in North Carolina. This guy in a hat, darker complected, getting out of this fountain 10 years before I was born. Elliot Erwitt passed away recently, a few weeks ago. You know, my name's Steve. I'm an artist. I take photographs of water fountains. Here's my phone. Would you take a picture of me? I'm going to drink out of one of the fountains. Make sure you get both of the fountains and me in the picture. It's the state capitol in South Carolina. Oh, you took the picture. Thanks. That's a really good picture. Thanks for taking that. Let me show you another picture. Having conversations with people I've never met about this photograph and the photograph of me that they just took. Public spaces to provoke reflection in order to discover something in the process, and we learn about ourselves in doing it. It's an elementary school in Pittsburgh. Look like I'm as tall as Shaq. Put them on Instagram. Put them online so people can comment. My daughter saw what I was up to. She said, "Why are you doing this?" We talked about segregation. We talked about Americans with disabilities. We talked about public pedagogy. She couldn't pronounce public pedagogy. Can I take a picture of you, Papa? Yeah, but I need to take a picture of you first. Sometimes we see the world differently through other people's eyes. People grow up. But knowledge and ideas and questions can live. We are in the month of February. This year it's the longest February for a while. We have an extra day, it's 29 days. I love you once a year, right? This month, and then next month is somebody else's month we get to love them, and somebody else's week we get to love them once a year. What a Valentine's Day. Oh, I did send this as Valentine's to people. I love you once a year because I've given you a month. Or do I give you an entire lifetime of respect and thoughtfulness? Act 6. Did we have Act 5? Okay. So, what are the chapters yet to come and the chapters that are being written now? I was appointed interim director at the School of Visual Arts, took on studies in art education. I'm one of just, I think, 2 people who have edited studies and art education. Marian Stankovich is the other one. I think I'm the only person of color who's edited both of them. No, it was the first one that edited both of them. Somebody else pointed these things out to me. And then, after a national search, I said, yeah, I'll be the dean of the college. And 7 weeks later, they said, go home, COVID is here. So, it's been fun. During this time, I worked on 2 books. One with Amy Craig at University of Arizona and Ruben Gaznavidi-Fernandez at University of Toronto, and the other with David Carlisle Kletchka, who's at The Ohio State University. These are 2 book covers. Probably recognize the photo on the right. Palgrave, we had 2 really interesting conversations with him about this book that uses CRT, critical race theory, as the methodology. And we said, hey, anybody studying chapters about how you use CRT through the arts and education? We want to see what you're up to. 2 things we wanted to do. One, we wanted to not use their generic design for the book cover. And we didn't like the kinds of celebratory clip art that they wanted to put on the front. We proposed this one and they accepted it, so we liked that one. The other was, that wasn't the title we wanted to call it. We wanted the title to be the arts as white property. They didn't think that would sound. So we named our introduction, The Arts as White Property. And this is a book that Dana and I worked on after doing many, many years of teacher education and summer institutes. We thought it was important to put these thoughts together. Power Grid Handbook is it's a growing subject at this point. Not a urban skyline, but a growing subject. The paths, the narratives, the experiences we have early on inform experiences we have later. Time and history inform us in interesting ways, not always linearly. So we reference history, we reference other people's histories quite often. It's been an interesting journey. There's more to come, and I'm eager to see what happens. But before we do, I want to leave you with a video. This is what it looked like to be a dean this first few weeks.
So as a kid, growing up with my brothers, we realized that anything we wanted, anything we could imagine, we could probably make. We'd use old copper pipes or molding for baseboards, any items that my dad was saving for home repairs that would allow us to make those visions or those ideas a reality. My parents really encouraged us to think, to ask critical questions, and then to make other possibilities out of what was given to us. My undergraduate ceramics professor showed me that you could take clay and sawdust and create vessels that would render water with waterborne disease potable. Seeing what is available and making something different out of it, it can quite literally change the direction of people's lives. Here at Penn State, our faculty are encouraging students to look into the world, to recognize structures and systems and practices, and question them in positive ways through their work as designers, architects, historians, teachers, musicians, actors, writers, and transfer that knowledge out into other realms, regardless of the medium. If they can imagine a solution, if they can imagine a response to a social issue, they can realize it. Clay just became a natural material for me to use. If you don't like what you have, you can kind of mold it back together and form a new object. If we give ourselves a set of parameters, we're already confined. But if we allow ourselves to even question the initial notion of those parameters, other possibilities open up. That is what we do in our college. We see the world as it is and imagine it in other ways. And then use our disciplinary practices to make those other ways a reality. I'm Steve Carpenter, and I empower people to question answers and assumptions in order to make possibilities possible.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'd like to invite our provost up to give you a special award.
Yes, thank you. It is my honor as provost and as a past dean of the arts, Steve, to give you this award. And I have to say to our students here that this is how amazing for you young people, right? Because I love this lecture series for two reasons. One, because you, if you look at your little list right there, right, the thought leaders in this field, the major, when you think about, Dr. Carpenter's, all his publications, all the amazing people that he's collaborated with through his entire life, right? Those thought leaders have been here, as Steve mentioned earlier. And I don't know of any other field, honestly, that brings all of those people together and annually just adds to that list. It's really a special it's a really special lecture series, and it's a who's who of your field, and that is really unique and really powerful. And the other thing that I love about this program is that, you know, as an ancient lady in second wave feminism, I learned that the personal is political, right? But the personal is also professional in ways that are so profound. And the other thing that's so, I think, impactful about this lecture series is that you learn about someone's life and the ways in which, you know, who they are and what they believe and the experiences that they have not only shape them creatively and artistically, but also in terms of their scholarship, right? And so that is also a really unique aspect of this lecture series. And you just did such a wonderful job. And so it is my great honor to award this to you, Professor. Say one more thing about making meaning, right? About making meaning. Like it was so, we get this glimpse into your career, and we can make so much more meaning through it because you shared some of yourself with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is really amazing. You have to, if you haven't seen this or one from previous years, please take a look. This is just cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation, Stephanie. Luke, thank you. Thank you, Provost, former Dean. Listen, I am. I've said what I can say because I'm out of words, but I am just deeply honored by this recognition.
Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. This will be a part of our archive now. So yes, one more congratulations for Dr. Carpenter. Please have some more food.
Yes.
And if we can have some of our visitors take a few pictures. Thanks.
You're so good.
I got